Imagine a town where several young people either mysteriously disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, with signs directly pointing to foul play. And then the local police just look the other way. Oh wait, that's just Fredericktown, Missouri. Because what do you mean this 19-year-old was found dead in the creepy attic of a known white supremacist, with a gunshot wound to the head in a location that would have been nearly impossible to do himself? And not to mention, this wasn't even the first suspicious death to occur in his isolated home. Yet as of today, he is still a free man. This is the mysterious death of Durante Martin, and if there's ever a case that screams cover-up, it's this one. I recently covered the mysterious death of Timmy Dees, which also occurred in Fredericktown, Missouri, and someone commented to look into Durante's case because they have so many disturbing things in common, yet both are still somehow unsolved. There's something really sinister happening in this town, so let's talk about it. This is Durante Martin. He was only 19 years old when he suddenly died in 2021. Durante lived in Missouri with his mom and 4 other siblings, and he was the oldest of the bunch. He was a defensive lineman for his high school, and his one main passion in life was football. He was a great student and teammate, and he was working 2 jobs at a local Walmart and restaurant to save up money for college. He was working so hard to fulfill his dream of playing college football, all in hopes that he would make enough money to take care of his entire family. In early 2021, Durante and his family moved to Ferguson, Missouri, and he was super excited because this was the first time in his entire life that he would get his own bedroom. But Durante still had a lot of friends in Fredericktown, which is where he went to high school. So every so often, he would hitch a ride the 106 miles back just to hang out with friends. Nobody knew that one spring night in 2021, he would do exactly that. Except this time, he would never make it back home. So on April 22nd, 2021, Durante had to get surgery on his right hand, which is his prominent hand. I know you might be wondering why I'm including this, but just trust me, it is super relevant to the story. So as a result of this surgery, which required him to get a lot of pins placed into his hand, his right hand was set in a thick cast that spanned from his fingertips all the way up to his elbow. Fast forward 2 days later, so now April 24th, 2021. That night, Durante decided to go to the 18th birthday party of Lainey Wade in Fredericktown with a few of his other friends. Lainey's birthday party was being held at her dad's house. His name is James Wade, and it was a really isolated home surrounded by a lot of trees in Madison County. I don't know how well Durante knew Lainey, but it wasn't a small party by any means, and there were quite a few people there, of all ages too. Like, one of the partygoers was 31 years old, and they were all at James's house. Anyway, it's been reported by said partygoers that once Durante got to the party, he felt really uncomfortable. No one goes into detail exactly why he felt uncomfortable, but my guess is because of this. So James, Lainey's dad, is a known white supremacist. Like, he is super active on social media, as you can see here, posting the most offensive things about people of color. And what you're seeing isn't even the worst of it. And he even proudly displayed a Confederate flag along the house where the party was being held. Like, he is not a good person, so I'm assuming this is a huge reason why Durante was feeling uncomfortable. Like I said, nothing about this has really been reported, but that's just my assumption, and I feel like it's based on good reason. So as the party went on, it was reported that Durante was acting more and more paranoid. How true that is, I'm not sure, but that's what people at the party were saying. Then at around 3 a.m., a 911 call is placed from the home, and it's made by James. James very calmly tells the operator, quote, "Apparently, a guy just shot himself." End quote. And in the background of this call, which goes on for about 5 minutes, you can hear other people in the background. Someone says, quote, "That's crazy. He," end quote, which is then cut off by another person yelling at them to shut up. When paramedics arrived on scene, they found Durante dead from a single gunshot wound to the head in James' attic, which is already the first red flag to me. There should be no reason for anyone to be up in this attic. It's dingy, old, and kind of dangerous to maneuver in. Also, I think this was Durante's first time in the house, so it makes no sense why he would be up there to begin with. So once police arrived, they found the gun that was used laying next to Durante's head in a pool of blood. But here's where the story starts to get really bizarre. So instead of taping off the house as a potential crime scene, the Madison County Sheriff's Office immediately thinks that Durante shot himself in the head. Because of that, a real investigation wasn't ever done. But more than that, what was done was really botched. So the officer who found the gun laying next to Durante didn't take any photos of the scene at all. And he actually removed the gun and put it into his police car without even knowing who it belonged to. I'm not an expert, but that doesn't seem like the correct step. But it gets even worse because Durante's body was then removed from the scene without law enforcement even notifying his family that he had been killed. So it wasn't even until the next day that Durante's mom found out that her oldest son was dead. And she didn't even find out by authorities. She found out through one of Durante's cousins who just so happened to hear from someone else. By this point, the medical examiner was already conducting an autopsy and the embalming process had already begun, all without his mom even knowing or consenting. Within 24 hours, the medical examiner concluded that Durante died by suicide. This was incredibly quick, and a thorough investigation wasn't even done. Police very briefly interviewed James Wade, who said he was on the main floor when the shot was fired, and then they interviewed two people at the party. One was a 31-year-old man, and one was a 19-year-old named Zach Graham. So the 31-year-old man confirmed that the gun that was used to kill Durante belonged to him. But like I said earlier, he said that night, Durante was acting super paranoid. I guess Durante said that he was feeling really uncomfortable, so this 31-year-old gave him his gun. This man said that he gave Durante the gun to make him feel more safe. And then he said that Durante was with another guy in the attic shortly before the shot was fired. The guy that was with Durante was 19-year-old Zach Graham, so he was interviewed too. Now, Zach said that he witnessed Durante kill himself, but he was the only one that was supposedly up there with Durante. Another partygoer recalled Durante asking a girl there, quote, "Why did you set me up?" End quote. At the time, it was rumored on social media that Durante was an informant for the police, and that just a couple months prior, he helped send a man to jail over another shooting. So because of this background information, it seems as though Durante was set up at this party. And then we all know what took place next. Now, looking at who the house belonged to and who he is as a racist person, it really shocked me to learn that police labeled Durante's death a suicide. And what's even crazier to me is that this all took place within 24 hours of finding the body. Now, it was April 27th, 2021, and police had yet to even reach out to Durante's mom. So she reached out to them, but she was quickly met with hostility. And the Madison County Sheriff's Office refused to tell her anything about her son. What's weird to me is that police fully believed that he ended his own life. So what's the point of withholding information now from his mom? Police eventually returned Durante's cell phone to his mom, only now it was mysteriously missing crucial data. Again, if authorities think that he ended his own life, how can they explain that? Well, over the next month, more and more things would unfold that would prove a thought the Martin family had been feeling all along, that Durante was murdered and that this was a huge cover-up. Starting with James Wade. After Durante was found dead in his home, he continued to post on social media about the situation in a really horrible tone. Then a few days after news broke about Durante's death, James allegedly confessed. A witness named Philip ran into him just a few days later, and James reportedly asked him if he wanted to come over and help him kill some N-words, which is disgusting to even repeat. At this point in time, everyone in the community was super upset about Durante's death, so James was prepared to have a lot of protesters in his yard. I guess James wanted Philip to come over as backup, but Philip declined. Instead, he asked him if what the rumors were saying were true, if he was actually responsible for Durante's murder. James responded, quote, "Damn right I did." End quote. And then he went on to say how much he hated people of color and said that, quote, "Murder is the easiest thing in the world to get by with." End quote. James allegedly went on describing easy ways to get away with murder, like wearing gloves and face coverings. Then, even more disturbing information about James came to light. Turns out that while James owned that house, 2 young men died in it. Durante was not the first. This came to light after a text of James's was leaked. He confirmed that 2 people did die by suicide on his property, but that he wasn't involved. So about 6 years before Durante's untimely death, 20-year-old Nick Lowry would also die at this very same home. So on Halloween morning 2014, James walked into the Madison County Sheriff's Office wanting to report a missing person. He was acting super erratic, but he wanted to report Nick missing. Nick was involved with one of James's daughters, and now he was suddenly missing. So police gave him some paperwork to fill out, but James went home and never came back. So this was dismissed. Well, later that same day, James's daughter walks into the police station. She tells them that her boyfriend, Nick Lowry, threatened to kill himself, and then he walked into the woods surrounding James's home with a gun. The next day, Nick's body was found in the woods on James' property with a single gunshot wound to the head. Now, Nick's family was outraged by this and said that Nick was not suicidal, and they also said that on more than one occasion, James threatened him. But for some reason, police decided that this wasn't worth looking into, and they closed Nick's case as a suicide, that no foul play was involved. 6 years later, Durante would die the exact same way, only this time it was in James's attic. So because of all of this information and the fact that Durante was not suicidal, his family hired an independent forensic pathologist to conduct a second autopsy, and the findings are interesting. So this forensic pathologist noted several inconsistencies from the initial autopsy. Durante was shot through his left temple, not at close range. One detail that really stands out is that this report found no evidence of a contact wound, close range wound, or even an intermediate range wound. In many self-inflicted gunshot cases, forensic pathologists expect to see signs that the gun was fired very close to the skin, such as soot, stippling, or other gunpowder residue around the wound. According to this report, none of those classic indicators were present, meaning the shot did not come at close range, typical in suicides. The autopsy also documented a few small injuries, including abrasions on the back of his hand and bruising on one finger. While those injuries don't really prove a struggle occurred, they do raise questions when viewed alongside the other findings. Ultimately, the pathologist stated that additional investigative information would be needed before determining whether Durante's death was a suicide, homicide, or something else entirely. In other words, based on the autopsy findings alone, she was not willing to say this was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This pathologist listed Durante's death as undetermined, and what's super weird is that a large amount of methamphetamine was found in his system. Now, this is weird to me for two reasons. One is that Durante was not known to do drugs at all. The other reason is that just 2 days prior, he had surgery on his right hand, and no drugs were found in his system then. So now, just 2 days later, he had a large amount in his system. It just doesn't make sense. Another major point of contention in this case is the fact that Durante was right-handed. His entire right hand was in a thick cast, and his entire right arm was in a sling, yet he was shot in the left temple. It's not totally impossible for this to be done, but it is highly unusual, and it should be a major red flag to authorities, but in this case, it wasn't. For some reason, even with this new information, local police still feel like Durante ended his own life, that no foul play was involved, completely disregarding the mounting pile of evidence to suggest otherwise. Their main two reasonings are, one, they think that the attic space was too small for anyone else to have been up there with Durante. But this is not true, as Zach confirmed that he was up there with him. The second reason is that it didn't look as though Durante's body had been moved after death. Dust was everywhere, and it looked like the items in the attic had sat untouched for a really long time. Durante also had a drop of blood on his leg that, according to authorities, proves that he was sitting with his legs crossed when he pulled the trigger, not someone else. I guess the blood traveled down his leg in a way that somehow proved he was the one that pulled the trigger. Because there were so many inconsistencies present, a jury was impaneled to review the case. During this review, the initial forensic pathologist said that because Durante was already embalmed when the second independent autopsy took place, this would have removed the markings and soot that would determine the distance in which the weapon was fired. So to him, he believes that the second autopsy information should be thrown out, but the second pathologist disagreed. In July of 2021, the jury came to a final conclusion that Durante's death was the result of violence, not suicide. So the jury single-handedly overturned the police's original finding of suicide. But you want to know the crazy part? Police refused to change Durante's manner of death to homicide, or even undetermined. They refused to further investigate, and in their eyes, Durante took his own life, and that is that. James took a polygraph in relation to this case and somehow passed, so he was never arrested in relation to Durante's death. Eventually, James moved out of the house and into the city of Fredericktown, and he was only there for a few weeks before he was arrested. And you'll never guess for what. An unrelated shooting. So in 2022, James took off looking for his daughters, who he thought were with a man named Jacob Graham and his brother, who you all know from earlier, Zach Graham, the last person to report reportedly see Durante alive. While he was driving, he spotted them in their car on the road too, so James ran them off the road. Jacob then began shooting at James, I'm assuming out of self-defense, which caused James to run into a tree. James then got out and ran into the sheriff's office on foot. Both he and Jacob were then arrested and charged with assault, and he did spend some time in jail for this, but not long enough, because soon after, he was released, and he's been a free man ever since. What's crazy is that pretty much the entire community of Fredericktown was thrilled that James was arrested for this. They despised him for what happened to Durante and Nick 6 years prior, and I think that alone says a lot about the kind of person that James is. If an entire town doesn't like you, I think that's a sign. Most recently in 2024, the FBI investigated Durante's case, but according to them, there just isn't enough evidence to prove foul play. As of today, Durante's case is still closed as a suicide, but I still have so many questions. Was he drugged that night? How did he end up in James's attic of all places, especially if he was already feeling set up and uncomfortable in the situation? Why did nobody notify his family of his death or even take pictures of the crime scene? Why did two suspicious deaths occur at the same home by a known white supremacist, but police failed to thoroughly investigate them both? To me, Durante taking his own life does not make sense in the slightest. I think based on all the information that we have, it seems really clear that someone else did this to Durante, and it's only a matter of time before they're caught. I always say that social media is the most powerful tool in getting stories like this out to the public. I recently covered the mysterious death of Timmy Dees. Someone in the comments there told me to look into this case because it is eerily similar. It happened in the same town, the same police department investigating, same level of botched investigation. In both cases even have overlapping suspects and friends. Both people in these cases were returning to Fredericktown to hang out with friends, only to end up dead. And the police there are turning their cheeks. There are a string of other mysterious disappearances and deaths in this same town that seemingly have no explanation. And honestly, I think more people should know about it. I think the more attention we put on these cases, maybe more resolutions will be made. In regards to Durante's case, there are two major ways that you can help his family. You can demand an independent investigation from the DOJ. Tell the Department of Justice to uncover the truth about Durante's death. Another way you can help is to report Durante Martin's death to the FBI Hate Crimes Division. Both of those numbers are listed here. His family deserves justice, and so does Durante. It seems clear, at least to me, that something really bad happened to him at the hands of another person. But it's now been 5 years, and whatever really happened to Durante inside that attic remains a mystery.